They said hospitals are places of healing. But what if the very hands meant to save you are the ones orchestrating your silence? When one woman's voice was stolen in an operating room, it wasn't a surgical error, it was a cover-up. And as the bodies began to fall, and the truth buried deeper, only one mind stood between justice and oblivion. This isn't just a case, it's a reckoning. It was a sharp, golden October morning, the kind that whispers of change in the air, when a letter unlike any other arrived at the elegant London flat of Hercule Poirot. Impeccably dressed, as was his custom, in a perfectly pressed grey suit with a gleaming pearl tie pin centered with surgical precision, Poirot sat sipping his rich morning chocolate with serene composure. His trusted valet George entered quietly, bearing the day's correspondence atop a polished silver tray. "Mercy, George," murmured Poirot as he gracefully accepted the pile, his fingers elegantly sorting through the mundane bills, a formal invitation to speak at a criminology symposium, and a note of appreciation from a recently satisfied client. But then his hand paused on a particular envelope, thick cream stationery, its surface embossed with the emblem of St. Catherine's Hospital. A flicker of intrigue danced in Poirot's eyes. Across the room, Captain Hastings, who was visiting from the countryside and lodging with his dear friend for a few days, glanced up from the morning paper. "Anything to pique your interest, old chap?" he asked. "Perhaps," Poirot replied, retrieving his silver letter opener with a deliberate air. The letter within was brief, urgent and curious. It was from Dr. Elizabeth Winters, a formidable medical professional, whom Poirot had assisted discreetly years ago. She now served as the deputy head of surgery at St. Catherine's Seas, and her letter requested his immediate presence at the hospital to discuss what she described only as a matter of ethics, delicate, urgent, and requiring his particular discretion and insight. "A hospital case." Hastings raised an eyebrow. "That's not quite your usual terrain." Poirot's mustache twitched slightly as he folded the letter with care. "No indeed. But when a woman of intellect and integrity writes with such gravity, Poirot listens." That afternoon, the pair drove through the winding country roads toward the quiet market town of Thornfield, the city slowly giving way to rolling hills and scattered woodland. At the edge of town, the towering structure of St. Catherine's Hospital rose from a landscaped slope, its original Victorian heart flanked by sleek glass extensions that hinted at modern wealth and privilege. "Impressive," murmured Hastings as they pulled into the private car park. Inside, the hospital's reception area exuded understated luxury. Marble floors gleamed beneath soft lighting, and oak paneling added a touch of old-world elegance. But the young woman at the front desk, despite her professional smile, betrayed a subtle anxiety in her eyes. Directed to the administrative wing, they waited in a polished anteroom, where the silence felt oddly heavy. "Everyone seems unusually tense," Hastings whispered. "Indeed," Poirot agreed, lowering his voice. "The atmosphere, it does not breathe calm." Moments later, the door opened to reveal a woman in her mid-40s. Dr. Elizabeth Winters carried herself with precision, neatly bobbed auburn hair, an immaculate white coat, and an air of controlled authority, but her eyes told another story: strain, exhaustion, and a shadow of fear. "Monsieur Poirot," she greeted, offering her hand. "And Captain Hastings, it is good of you to come so quickly. Please come in." Rather than retreating behind her desk, she closed the door firmly and turned to them, her face drawn tight. "This morning, I intended to speak with you about a troubling ethical issue within the hospital, one that has been weighing on me for weeks. But now," she hesitated, visibly gathering her composure, "something far more serious has occurred." Poirot's tone softened. "Something has happened, madame." She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, something terrible. Dr. Stephen Harris, our head of surgery, was found dead in his office barely 2 hours ago." Hastings inhaled sharply, stunned. Poirot, by contrast, narrowed his gaze with clinical focus. "The circumstances?" he asked. "He was alone. The door was locked from the inside. His assistant found him when she returned from lunch." She swallowed hard, and there was an empty syringe beside him. Hastings leaned forward. "You suspect suicide?" Dr. Winters hesitated. "That's what it appears to be. Or perhaps an accident. But my instincts..." She stopped herself. Poirot tilted his head. Yes, he prompted. Her voice trembled, just slightly. My instincts tell me it's neither. Something about this doesn't fit. Outside, the autumn wind rustled the last clinging leaves against the hospital windows. Inside, the stillness felt too complete, like a held breath. And in that breath, Poirot sensed it already. This was not just a tragic death. This was the beginning of something darker, a secret buried deep in the sterile corridors of medicine and power. And that secret was waiting to be uncovered. Just as Dr. Winters was beginning to explain that some senior staff occasionally self-medicated for headaches or stress-related ailments, a practice tolerated in silence.
Yes.
A sudden urgent knock sliced through the conversation, and before a reply could be given, the door swung open sharply. A tall, silver-haired man with the commanding air of a military general strode in, his icy gaze sweeping the room before hardening at the sight of the guests. "Elizabeth, there you are," he snapped. "The board is waiting. We've convened an emergency meeting." His tone made it clear he was not accustomed to delay or defiance. His eyes landed on Poirot and Hastings, narrowing slightly with disapproval. "I wasn't informed you were expecting visitors." Dr. Winters stood unfazed, her voice calm but clipped. "Dr. Montgomery, this is Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings. I asked them here as consultants."
Oh.
Montgomery's lip curled. "Consultants, this is hardly the time for outsiders. We're dealing with a crisis, not hosting an inspection." But Winters met his authority with her own quiet resolve, her voice steel beneath velvet. "It is precisely because of the crisis that I called Mr. Poirot. He's a world-renowned detective." The word detective hung in the air like a dropped scalpel. Montgomery's face flushed with incredulity. "A detective? This is absurd. Stephen's death, tragic as it was, appears to be a clear case of self-inflicted harm. There's no mystery, Elizabeth. Just a man pushed too far." Winters stepped forward, her gaze cold. "Dr. Montgomery, I must insist we continue this conversation in private." Her words were not a request. Poirot and Hastings stepped discreetly into the hallway as the door shut behind them, the muffled sounds of heated argument bleeding through the thick wooden panels. Hastings turned to speak, but Poirot held up a hand, his sharp eyes locked on a distant figure at the end of the corridor, a man in a hospital maintenance uniform, tall and lean, who stood oddly still, watching them with unsettling focus. The moment their eyes met, the man flinched and ducked through a service door with unnatural haste. "Most curious," Poirot murmured. "Did you see that, Hastings? He wore the uniform of a janitor, but his hands were too clean, too smooth. Not the hands of one who scrubs floors and handles harsh chemicals." And the way he looked at Dr. Winters, he narrowed his eyes thoughtfully. "That was not curiosity. It was recognition. And perhaps, my friend, the shadow of fear." Their thoughts were soon interrupted by an invitation, albeit a reluctant one, from Dr. Montgomery, granting them restricted access to investigate the circumstances of Dr. Stephen Harris's death. Though he made no effort to conceal his contempt, calling the whole affair an unfortunate incident blown out of proportion, Poirot remained unshaken. "And yet, if there is truly nothing more, then the truth will only vindicate your hospital." "No," he said gently, with a pointed smile. "The first interview was with Dr. Vivian Taylor, an impeccably dressed surgeon whose cool demeanor and expensive taste suggested ambition as polished as her resume. Dr. Harris was a genius," she said bluntly, "but impossible. Half the staff avoided him when they could. The other half suffered him for the sake of their careers." She checked her watch impatiently. "I'm due in surgery. Please be brief." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "I understand you are next in line for his position." A shadow passed through her composed features. "That decision was made weeks ago. This changes nothing." Her tone was final. From there they met Dr. Robert Palmer, Harris's protégé, a twitchy, anxious young man who seemed too nervous to lie but too scared to tell the whole truth. He'd been off these last few weeks, Palmer confessed, wringing his hands. Distracted, anxious, he kept checking files that weren't part of any active case. "He told me once, Robert, sometimes what we hide to protect lives can also destroy them." I didn't know what he meant, but now I wonder. His voice trailed into silence as Poirot's expression turned grave. The little grey cells already beginning to stir with the scent of something rotten, not just a death, but a deception deeper and darker than the hospital corridors dared to admit. The late afternoon sun filtered weakly through the smudged windows of Marlowe General, casting long slanting shadows across the institutional walls as Detective Alain Desrosiers stepped inside the dimly lit administrative wing, his polished shoes echoing softly against the linoleum floor. Rumors of an esteemed physician's untimely demise had traveled fast, but Desrosiers had learned long ago that truth often moved slower, buried under layers of precision, protocol, and pretended ignorance. First to greet him was Dr. Elaine Ward, the hospital's icy director, whose expression held the practiced calm of someone accustomed to inconvenient truths. Dr. Leclerc was a man of high standards, she offered. Her voice clipped, but old reputations sometimes catch up. Desrosiers noted the way she chose her words carefully, like a scalpel. And yet, you didn't ask what I meant by that, she added, almost too casually. Because I suspect you'd rather I didn't, he replied, letting the silence press in. Then came head nurse Miriam Voss, starched collar tight as her lips, her posture a soldier's. Leclerc was brilliant, stubborn, often cruel, but consistent. That I respected, she stated with finality. You found the body? Desrosiers asked. No, his assistant Jenna Langley did. I was called to verify death, though frankly, any fool could have done it. Her gaze hardened. He was slumped at his desk, face pale, eyes wide, syringe still in hand. Potassium chloride, standard in small doses, lethal in excess. Would he have reason to administer it himself? Desrosiers asked. Not unless hubris is a heart condition, she said sharply. He was many things, but suicidal. No, men like him never think the world can outsmart them. Later Desrosiers stepped into Leclerc's office. It was a cathedral of order, books alphabetized, journals sorted by volume and date, everything clinically immaculate. Yet it was too pristine. This wood has been polished recently, he murmured, brushing a gloved hand along the bookshelf. Yet no fingerprints on the phone. Odd for a man constantly on calls. A desk drawer yielded a torn photograph. An elegant woman, face half missing, but with eyes that triggered something in his memory, and a calendar entry marked simply, VL, reckoning. Not meeting, not discussion, reckoning. Sounds less like business, more like judgment, he whispered. His final interview of the day was with Jenna Langley, Leclerc's shaken assistant, her hands trembling around a twisted handkerchief. He told me to take the afternoon off, she said, eyes red-rimmed. That never happened before. When I returned, the door was locked from inside. I had to call maintenance. Who responded? New janitor, Mr. Rourke, opened it in under 2 minutes. He's quiet, but peculiar, his hands too soft, like he's never cleaned a day in his life. Desrosiers raised an eyebrow. He's only been here a month, yes, she nodded. How did you know? Hours later, cross-checking staff records with the reluctant compliance of Dr. Ward, Desrosiers found the day's cleaning logs, every office accounted for except Leclerc's. Sloppy record-keeping. Ward offered, but even she didn't believe it. Outside, dusk had wrapped the hospital in a cold hush, leaves whispering across the asphalt as Desrosiers pulled his coat tight. What's your instinct? Asked his partner, Inspector Caldwell. Obvious suicide, he replied slowly. But every obvious thing here carries a shadow. A man of routine makes an uncharacteristically chaotic exit, an unscheduled cleaning, a cryptic calendar entry, a mysterious janitor with silk hands. Just then, in the hospital garage, 2 silhouettes emerged. Rourke, the janitor, engaged in a hushed yet fierce exchange with a tall, sharp-eyed woman, Dr. Vivian Lang, head of psychiatry, and once, Leclerc's bitterest rival. Ah, Desrosiers muttered, eyes narrowing. Perhaps reckoning was never meant to be his alone. Would you like me to continue this story in a future part? The morning rain fell steadily, a soft and persistent drumming against the window panes, as if the sky itself were whispering secrets long buried, secrets that Inspector Rahale intended to unearth. He adjusted the cuffs of his coat with the same precise care he gave to every detail. his eyes sharp with the kind of knowing only men well acquainted with the shadows of truth possess. Major Asher stood beside him, silent, though his unease hung in the air like fog. Before Asher could speak, Rahale muttered, "This isn't suicide. No one erases phone data, clears an entire office, and scribbles initials into a calendar to simply take their own life. Someone's hiding something." Their next destination was an old red brick cottage on the outskirts of Glenmere, where Miss Hilda Crane, once a seasoned surgical nurse, had abruptly resigned 2 years prior, under mysterious circumstances. She opened the door with suspicion in her eyes, and a heaviness on her shoulders that spoke of truths too long carried. "You're here about Harris, aren't you?" she asked, her voice not surprised but resigned. Rahale offered a silent nod. "Then you deserve the version they buried." Inside, the sitting room smelled of lavender and old paper, an oddly calming fragrance for what would follow. "Stephen Harris was brilliant," she began, "but his loyalty to Glenmere Hospital was unwavering, even when it shouldn't have been. There was one case I can't forget, a girl named Elise Markham, a pre-med student, just 21. She came in for a minor arthroscopic procedure. Routine, but something went horribly wrong. Her vitals crashed under anesthesia, brain damage from lack of oxygen. She never recovered. She's still in a wheelchair to this day." Asher leaned forward, his tone edged with outrage. "What happened after that?" Hilda hesitated, then said, "Harris shut it down, claimed it was a tragic complication. The hospital quietly paid off the family. No press, no investigation. But the real question was, whose fault was it?" She lowered her voice. "The anesthesiologist was James P. Larkin, young, inexperienced, and a bit out of his depth. Just days after the incident, he disappeared. They said his mother was ill, but no one ever saw him again." She looked up then, eyes piercing, and now in Dr. Harris's calendar, the initials JP appeared, next to the word reconciliation. That wasn't coincidence. That was intent. Either Larkin came back to reveal something, or someone feared he would. Either way, someone wanted Harris silenced. She paused, voice trembling. If Larkin came back, it wasn't for forgiveness, it was for justice. As Raheel stepped outside, the cold rain still falling, he stared up at the grey sky and murmured, "A girl's life was destroyed. A doctor buried the truth, and now that truth has come clawing its way back. This isn't just murder, it's the consequence of a long-forgotten crime." Asher nodded slowly, but his mind was already racing. The next step was clear. Find James P. Larkin, dead or alive. Because whatever his fate, he was the final piece of this haunted puzzle. The flicker in Miss Crane's eyes when Raheel uttered the name Peterson was fleeting, but undeniable. A name wrapped in silence and soaked in unfinished business. "James Peterson," she murmured, as though breathing life into something long buried. Her tone dropped, eyes darting toward the shuttered window. "People stopped saying that name after the incident. The hospital sealed everything shut. Dr. Montgomery made sure of it. Settlements, NDAs, silence bought in cold cash. They wanted it gone, forgotten. But Dr. Harris, he didn't forget. The Markham case changed him. He stopped using the main elevators, flinched when alarms went off. They said he was sick, but I think it was guilt that made him unravel." Raheel leaned forward, voice low. "Who led the surgery?" Crane exhaled. "Harris supervised. Taylor assisted." She was green then, hungry to prove herself. Everything looked normal until it wasn't. 1 second Elise was stable, and the next her vitals nosedived. The oxygen dropped, the monitors screamed, then silence. Harris never recovered from that day, at least not inside. Outside the old cottage, the wind cut through the trees like a whisper of unfinished stories. Major Asher spoke softly. "JP, those initials from the calendar. James Peterson." Raheel's eyes hardened. Her brother, and now he resurfaces, overqualified, hiding as a janitor, taking orders from the very man who failed his sister. That's no accident, it's premeditation. The trail led them next to Glenmere Hospital, where Raheel dispatched Hastings to work his charm on the bubbly receptionist, Miss Dawson, while he quietly searched records. "Terrible shame about Dr. Harris," she said, glancing nervously down the hallway. "But let's just say, Not many are crying about it. He was difficult. Brilliant, yes, but always distant. Cold. Hastings leaned in. And Peterson, her expression shifted. Oh, I remember him. Had it out with Harris last week. Raised voices. Peterson looked ready to explode. Something about betrayal, but I didn't catch it all. He told me once, he studied chemistry. Strange, right? A janitor with a science degree. He said times were tough, but still, she trailed off, lips tight. That evening, Raheel confirmed what he had begun to suspect. Caroline Peterson's name appeared in sealed medical records, linked to the botched Markham case. The pattern was emerging, a bright young woman left paralyzed, her brother returning in disguise, and an alleged reconciliation that ended with Harris's lifeless body, found slumped in his office. The puzzle pieces were no longer random, they were forming a picture soaked in buried rage and cold revenge. But when Raheel and Hastings returned to their hotel that night, a deeper chill met them at the door. Hastings froze. Something's off. The room was quiet, too quiet, yet not untouched. Raheel's razor-aligned toiletries had shifted slightly. The air held a foreign trace of musky cologne, and a file folder sat askew, its edge hanging over the desk like a crooked grin. Then Raheel saw it, centered neatly on his pillow. A brittle newspaper clipping, showing a smiling Caroline Peterson, frozen in time before her tragedy. Across it, in jagged red ink, "Some secrets are worth killing for. Go home, detective." The message was venomous, and it pulsed with warning, but Raheel didn't flinch. If anything, his stare grew colder, his resolve sharper. Whoever had left that note didn't understand him. This wasn't about solving a mystery anymore. It was about exhuming a buried crime, masked by medicine, power, and silence. Glenmere Hospital wasn't just a place of healing, it was a house of ghosts, and one of them had learned how to kill. Somewhere in its sterile halls, a truth was waiting, festering, dangerous, and Raheel knew now. This web of silence wasn't just hiding guilt, it was baiting him deeper into something far more sinister. Outside the hushed corridor of the radiology wing, the sterile brightness of the hospital lighting cast long cold reflections on the polished floor, where a lone figure moved with eerie precision, mop gliding in practiced, economical strokes, not the lazy motions of routine, but the deliberate cadence of someone with purpose buried beneath the surface. There was something too focused about him, too exact, as if each sweep was a calculated move in a larger plan. As Raheel and Hastings approached, he paused, eyes lifting slowly, revealing an intelligent sharpness dulled by exhaustion, as though sleep had long since become a luxury. He looked to be in his mid-30s, but the weight of grief etched lines where time hadn't. "Mr. Peterson," Raheel said quietly, voice calm but edged with a gravity that made the janitor's jaw tense. A flicker of recognition passed between them, before Peterson spoke in a low voice. "Break room's empty." Without another word, he turned and led them down a side corridor into a cramped staff room, its humming fluorescent lights casting faint shadows across battered lockers, and the faint aroma of stale coffee. He shut the door behind them, the click of the latch cutting off the world outside. Turning slowly, he faced them like a man bracing for a blow he knew would come. "You're investigating Dr. Harris's death," he said flatly, not as a question, but a weary confirmation. Raheel nodded once, his gaze steady. "We believe you may possess insights not typically expected of someone in your position." Peterson's jaw twitched, a flash of defensiveness surfacing. "I'm just a janitor," he said, but the conviction in his voice faltered. Raheel's tone sharpened slightly. "A janitor, with a degree in chemistry, and a sister, Caroline Peterson, whose name remains buried in the shadows of Dr. Harris's past." The silence that followed was crushing, as though the room itself held its breath. Peterson's shoulders slumped, the carefully built mask of a faceless employee crumbling to reveal the raw anguish beneath. 5 years, he whispered, the words catching in his throat. 5 years watching her fade. First her career, then her confidence, then her will to even get out of bed. She was bright, driven, medicine was everything to her. And after that surgery, his voice cracked. She couldn't even hold a spoon, couldn't sign her own name. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, trembling with restrained fury. Do you know what it's like to watch someone you love disappear, while the people who caused it walk free, laughing at award dinners, publishing papers, pretending they're gods in white coats? Rahil's voice softened, compassionate but probing. You came here looking for truth, not revenge. Peterson's nod was slow but resolute. We couldn't sue. The settlement shut us up, ironclad NDAs, legal threats. But they couldn't stop me from taking a mop and working these halls. I've been here 3 years, watching, listening, connecting the dots no one wanted seen. His voice dropped, barely above a whisper. Caroline deserved answers. Hastings leaned forward. That calendar note in Harris's schedule, JP reconciliation, that was you. Peterson hesitated, eyes flickering with guilt and defiance. Yes, I confronted him. I showed him everything I'd gathered, anomalies in surgical notes, whistleblower testimonies from 2 former nurses, even discrepancies in drug dosage logs. At first he scoffed, acted like I was some obsessed crackpot. His lip curled. But then he changed. His face went pale. He started fidgeting, panicking, said it was never supposed to end like that. That the harm was accidental. He exhaled shakily. And then he mentioned someone. Her. Said she wouldn't let the truth surface. That she was watching everything. That she was too close now for risks. Did he say who she was? Rahil asked, eyes narrowing. Peterson shook his head. He wouldn't say. Just kept repeating that she would never allow a scandal to erupt. That she'd kill it at the root if necessary. He stepped back. His voice urgent now. But I didn't kill him. I swear it. He was alive when I left, around 3:30. I had to get back. Maintenance has been eyeing me for slipping away too often. I just wanted a confession. I wanted the truth exposed, not buried with him in a coffin. There was a rawness in his voice, not of deception, but of long-suppressed pain now too heavy to hold. Rahil studied him for a long moment, reading his body language, the micro-tremors of fear and honesty clashing inside him. Then without a word, he turned, and the 2 men exited the break room, heading toward the hospital's records department, where thick folders lined the walls like the final resting place of forgotten secrets. Do you believe him? Hastings asked in a whisper as they passed through the cold, institutional hallways. Rahil's response was measured, careful. His story has the ring of truth, but there's still a shadow standing behind it. This she, whoever she is, terrified a man like Dr. Harris. And men like him don't scare easily. Just ahead the archive room loomed, quiet, cold and dimly humming with decades of sealed knowledge. Inside a fastidious clerk waited behind a wire-reinforced glass window, unaware that buried in the files behind him might be the blueprint of a truth someone powerful was willing to kill to keep hidden. And Rahil knew now. The death of Dr. Harris was only the first tremor in a storm that had been quietly building, hidden in plain sight, behind hospital walls. As Poirot and Hastings meticulously combed through the sparse files handed to them, most of Caroline Peterson's case shrouded in layers of legal seals and confidentiality. One overlooked document offered a crack in the wall, the surgical logs. Hastings, ever perceptive, tapped a section of the report. His voice low but sharp. Here, look at this entry. Dr. Taylor didn't just assist during Caroline's surgery. According to this, she handled over 70% of the operation. That's far beyond an assistant's role. Poirot leaned closer, his keen detective eyes scanning the document, then glancing over to a separate set of pages, the settlement paperwork, buried under stacks of routine admin records. He pointed silently at the repetitive scrawl of a familiar name, Dr. Taylor. Her signature was everywhere, on consent forms, on internal memos, even on documents related to the hospital's legal response. Highly irregular, Poirot muttered, for someone supposedly not leading the procedure. As they flipped through more records, a disturbing picture began to take shape, a calculated effort to downplay Dr. Taylor's involvement in both the surgery and the storm that followed. The deeper they dug, the clearer it became. Dr. Taylor hadn't just been part of the operation, she had directed it, manipulated its records, and perhaps orchestrated its cover-up. The question was, Why?
And who else knew?
That afternoon, as the rain began to patter against the windows, Poirot and Hastings took a walk through the hospital grounds, hoping to synthesize their findings away from potential eavesdroppers. But midway across the courtyard, Hastings abruptly halted. "Poirot," he said in a cautious murmur, "we're being watched." Poirot didn't turn his head. Instead he adjusted his angle slightly, and used the reflective surface of a nearby window to survey behind them. There, across the street, a car idled at the curb. Inside, a lone figure sat motionless, their gaze fixed on the hospital's inner walkways. "Let us move as if we're leaving," Poirot said softly, "but take a route that brings us closer." They diverted their path subtly, drifting toward the hospital's exit. But just as they reached the iron gates, the car roared to life. Its tires screeched against the wet pavement, and it sped off before they could get too near. Hastings caught only a fleeting glimpse, but it was enough. "There was a hospital parking permit on the windshield," he reported, breath quickening. "But I couldn't see the driver's face." Before they could even exchange theories, Poirot's phone rang abruptly. The screen displayed, "Dr. Elizabeth Winters." He answered swiftly. "Dr. Winters." Her voice was a hushed panic. "Come quickly, I'm in the archive room. I found something in Harris's personal files. It's about Caroline. I think I know who." The call cut off with a sudden breathy gasp, followed by a sharp crash, and then nothing. Just silence. No tone, no voice, only dread. Without hesitation, they rushed back through the hospital. Poirot's usually graceful stride, now urgent and unrestrained. A taxi splashed a wave of muddy rainwater onto his pristine shoes, but he didn't blink. The hospital corridors blurred around them until they reached the archive room door. Ajar and whispering a tale of violence. Inside was chaos. Files lay scattered like the aftermath of a storm. A chair lay broken on its side. Shards of fluorescent light from a smashed fixture glittered across the linoleum floor like ice, and beneath it, crumpled near an open filing cabinet, lay Dr. Elizabeth Winters, motionless, a thin ribbon of blood winding down her temple. "Call medical assistance, immediately," Poirot ordered, dropping to his knees beside her. He checked her pulse, faint but present. She was alive but barely. The scene screamed accident to the untrained eye, but to Poirot, the angles, the timing, and the empty file drawers whispered something else. Interference. Silencing. Moments later, hospital staff poured into the room, responding to the emergency alert. Among them was Dr. Taylor. Her expression, at first professional, betrayed a flicker of shock when she spotted Poirot and Hastings already inside. "What happened?" she demanded. Kneeling beside Winters, Poirot stood slowly, gaze fixed on her with sharp intensity. "That, madame," he replied evenly,
"Is precisely what I intend to uncover."
Dr. Winters was reviewing personal files related to Harris and to the Peterson case when she was interrupted. "By what? An accident?" Taylor asked, but her voice lacked conviction. Before Poirot could answer, Dr. Montgomery stormed in, his tone indignant.
"His is unacceptable."
"First Dr. Harris dies, now this. What was Winters even doing here?" "Seeking the truth," Poirot replied coldly. "A pursuit that, I've observed, seems increasingly hazardous in this hospital." As Dr. Winters was carefully lifted onto a stretcher, Poirot scanned the floor and noticed a single misplaced folder lying open beside a stack of overturned documents. Its label read Peterson, but it was empty, its contents missing, perhaps stolen in the same moment that left Winters unconscious. Poirot's jaw clenched. Someone wasn't just hiding a mistake. They were erasing witnesses, one by one, and the clock, he feared, was ticking faster than they realized. The filing cabinet, once neatly locked and filled with carefully indexed documents, now stood ajar like a gaping wound in the sterile stillness of the office. Its contents stripped completely, as though someone had anticipated the precise moment of Dr. Winters' fall, and executed a clean, calculated erasure. No files, no reports, no trace. The nurses whispered that she had been found collapsed in the hallway outside the archives, her head bloodied, pulse faint and eyes wide open yet unseeing. The diagnosis was grim: a severe concussion, possible cerebral swelling and fractured memory pathways. She had been transferred in haste to the intensive care unit, her fate uncertain, her silence deafening. That afternoon Director Montgomery, ever the polished statesman of hospital politics, summoned Poirot with the tension of a man holding back a dam about to burst. Inside his office the air was stiff with contained panic. "This has gone far enough," Montgomery said through tightly controlled lips, his hands pressed flat on the mahogany desk as though trying to steady himself. "2 major incidents in 2 days, this hospital cannot afford this kind of chaos." Poirot, unfazed, studied him with calm precision. "And yet," he said softly, "you speak of reputation as though it outweighs the blood on your floors." Montgomery's jaw tightened, eyes narrowing with the flicker of someone unused to being challenged. "We are providing Dr. Winters with the highest level of care." "And what of the care you offered Caroline Peterson?" Poirot asked, his voice like a scalpel, slicing clean through the deflection. "Do you remember her?" Montgomery's face stiffened, not dramatically, but enough for the trained eye to catch. "An unfortunate surgical complication," he replied after a pause, his words practiced. "Years ago. It was handled privately." "Privately, perhaps, but not justly," Poirot countered. "Miss Peterson has lived with paralysis since the surgery. Does that feel amicable to you?" "And what of her brother?" That caught Montgomery off guard. "Her brother, James Peterson," Poirot said smoothly, "who now mops your corridors at night, searching for answers in shadows because your board bought silence in daylight." Montgomery paled, fingers twitching. "He was hired through an external firm. I had no idea." "But you did know Caroline could not sign the settlement documents, did you not?" Poirot continued, eyes narrowing. "Her condition post-surgery made that impossible, and yet the board proceeded." The director's discomfort grew, and in that silence, Poirot leaned in further. "Tell me about Dr. Taylor's role. Do not say minimal. She assisted during the procedure. She processed paperwork. Nothing more. And yet now, with a trail of ruined lives behind her, she's being promoted." Montgomery checked his watch with shaky fingers. "The board believes it's best for morale, for stability." "Or to bury the truth deeper," Poirot murmured. That evening, as the halls echoed with muted steps and the tension of a hospital on edge, Poirot found Nurse Barrow alone in the dim staff lounge, her coffee untouched, her shoulders tense. "You were present during Caroline Peterson's surgery, were you not?" he asked gently. She didn't answer right away. Then, barely above a whisper, "Yes, it was routine, until it wasn't." "What happened?" Poirot pressed. "The truth, nurse. It may be the only cure left." Her voice broke slightly. "It was Dr. Taylor. She miscalculated the anesthesia, too much, too fast. Realized it too late. Tried to reverse it but overcorrected. Caroline seized. Dr. Harris, he took the blame. Why? Because he knew what would happen if word got out. Taylor was protected. Her family, the board, everyone closed ranks. He was pressured. He sacrificed himself to keep the hospital's reputation intact. It destroyed him. And now he's dead. And Winters nearly joined him." Poirot said solemnly. "How many more must fall before the rot is exposed?" Outside, rain began to streak the windows like a cleansing storm yet to come. As dusk gave way to night, Hastings returned from his meeting with James Peterson, his modest apartment a shrine of obsession and grief. He had handed over a weathered notebook, every page filled with observations, names, diagrams, and one line repeated like a mantra, etched deeper with every stroke. "They buried the truth in this place. But truth, like the dead, never stays buried for long." Framed photographs of Caroline, before the tragedy, adorned every wall of James Peterson's modest flat like frozen echoes of a brighter time. Glimpses of a spirited young woman caught mid-laughter, her eyes dancing with the kind of fierce ambition and warmth that only those who believe in better tomorrows possess. In every frame, she stood on the edge of a promising future, her passion for physiotherapy evident in her every expression, until one fateful operation reduced that vibrant promise to quiet devastation. Now, her smile lingered like a ghost that wouldn't let go. As Poirot and Hastings moved briskly through the shadowed corridors of the hospital grounds, their footsteps sharp against the flagstones, the chill night air tugged at their coats, and the silence between them was thick with unspoken worry. Hastings, unable to contain the turbulence of his thoughts, finally broke it, voice edged with urgency. "Poirot, A troubling possibility just struck me, he said, his eyes flicking up toward the darkened hospital windows, where secrets waited behind sterile glass. Suppose it was Dr. Taylor who committed the surgical error, and Dr. Harris covered for her out of loyalty or pressure. But now, with Taylor nearing a promotion, what if Harris couldn't live with the lie any longer? Poirot slowed slightly, his sharp mind already connecting invisible threads. Oui, mon ami, the timing. It no longer feels accidental. His death. It was not chance. It was consequence. Perhaps Harris was finally ready to speak, and someone ensured he would never get the chance. Just then, Poirot's phone buzzed like an electric jolt through the tension. The screen lit up with the name James Peterson. He answered at once. On the other end, James's voice quivered with a mixture of fear and reckless resolve. I just received a note, anonymous. No signature, just instructions. It said to come to the hospital rooftop tonight. It promises to tell me the truth about Caroline. Everything. Poirot's tone grew urgent. Monsieur, you must not go alone. It is far too dangerous. Let us meet you. But the line had already gone dead. James had made his decision. Within seconds, Poirot and Hastings were sprinting back toward the east wing, their urgency cutting through the stillness of the night like a knife. The skies had deepened to a nearly black hue, swallowing the stars, while above them, the hospital loomed like a sleeping beast riddled with secrets. The overhead lights flickered as they passed, casting jagged shadows that danced across the grounds like restless spirits. Then, rounding the far corner, both men came to a sudden breathless halt. A figure stood poised at the rooftop's edge, silhouetted against the eerie silver light of the moon. For a second, the world held its breath. Then, the figure plummeted. A terrible silence followed. Then, crack, a hollow, bone-chilling crash echoed across the grounds. Racing to the spot beneath the ledge, Hastings' stomach dropped. But what he found wasn't a corpse. It was a shattered medical mannequin, the kind used for CPR training, its plastic limbs grotesquely sprawled, its lifeless eyes staring into nothing. This was no accident, Poirot muttered darkly. It was theater. A performance with a single goal: terror. They pushed open the side entrance and ascended the disused service stairs, each metal step groaning beneath their urgency, the flickering fluorescent lights above flashing like a warning. The door to the rooftop creaked open slowly, revealing James standing near the parapet, ghost pale, breath unsteady, eyes wide with shock. Monsieur Peterson, Poirot called gently, stepping closer. Are you harmed? James shook his head, but his voice trembled. There was no one when I got here. Just that dummy, standing near the edge. A note was pinned to its chest. He handed over the crumpled scrap of paper, his fingers cold. The words, scrawled in frantic, almost angry handwriting read, "Next time it will be you." James continued, voice barely above a whisper. The moment I took the note, someone shoved the mannequin off. I turned, but whoever it was, they'd vanished. No sound, no footsteps. Hastings scanned the rooftop's perimeter. Only 2 access points, he said grimly. The service stair we came through, and the main access over there. They had to use one, unless they're still up here. Poirot's gaze swept the darkness, eyes probing the shadows. We are being watched, he said quietly, and warned. Without wasting another breath, he led them away, back to his hotel room, a quiet place with secure locks and a view of the city that now felt far less peaceful. There, in the muted glow of a desk lamp, James relayed every grim detail. The note had promised answers, a confession perhaps, but it had been bait, a sinister trap dressed as hope. It wasn't just to scare me, he said bitterly. It was to show me how close they can get. Poirot folded the note thoughtfully, his brow furrowed in grim calculation. This changes everything. If they're trying to frighten you away, it means you're circling the truth. Harris's death, Winter's attack, now this, all threads from the same rotten root. Dr. Taylor, Hastings suggested, she stands to gain the most, and Nurse Barrow confirmed she made the fatal mistake. Perhaps, Poirot murmured, his voice heavy with suspicion. But this feels orchestrated. Taylor may be a piece, but someone else is moving the board. and we are being tested. The next morning, with the weight of new danger pressing down like a storm, Poirot secured a meeting with Dr. Montgomery. In the cold clinical expanse of the hospital director's office, framed degrees behind him, files stacked in unnerving precision, Montgomery sat rigid, his sharp suit immaculate, but his sleepless eyes betraying the strain of secrets held too long. His fingers were laced tightly on the desk, as if bracing for impact. Poirot began, voice calm, but laced with quiet fire. Dr. Montgomery, I have spent the night reviewing everything we have uncovered, and I must confess, the more I reflect, the more the inconsistencies in the Peterson case disturb me. But what troubles me most is the silence surrounding them, a silence too clean, too complete, and entirely unnatural. For the first time, Montgomery's expression cracked, a flicker of unease passing behind his polished demeanor, and Poirot knew, in that precise moment, that they were finally striking the right nerve, and that the walls around the truth were beginning to tremble. Dr. Yousaf's fingers trembled ever so slightly as he snapped the folder shut, the dull thud of paper against leather far heavier than its contents. His voice came out clipped, guarded, as if rehearsed behind closed doors. That's all I can share officially, he said, but the strain in his tone betrayed the inner fracture lines he was trying hard to mask. Inspector Reyes, seated across from him with unnerving calm, leaned forward just enough to tighten the noose of silence, and unofficially, he asked, eyes narrowing, what would the board say if it came to light that Dr. Selina Ahmed, not Dr. Bashir, was the one who botched Farah Rizvi's operation, or that this truth was meticulously scrubbed during the compensation negotiations to protect her image? Yousaf's face drained of color, his mouth working soundlessly before he managed, that isn't. But Reyes's voice cut in, soft yet immovable. Nurse Halima confirmed the discrepancy, and Dr. Kamran, he paused, watching Yousaf squirm, found supporting evidence in Bashir's private files, records that are now, rather curiously, missing. Silence hung thick between them, until Yousaf's shoulders dropped, defeated, the weight of years pressing down. It was complicated, he said at last, his voice hushed with guilt. Selina showed extraordinary promise, brilliance, really. Her father funds nearly half our research facilities. Our oncology wing bears his name. If we lost their backing, the hospital would crumble. We made a judgment call, a judgment that left a young woman's body ruined, and a good man in a grave. Reyes said coldly, it wasn't so black and white. Yousaf insisted, eyes pleading now. Farah received the best post-op treatment. The settlement was considerable, but conscience isn't healed by checks. Reyes replied sharply. And now, Bashir is dead. When did he begin to struggle with his silence? A little over a month ago, Yousaf admitted. He started withdrawing, said the lie was poisoning him. The closer Selina came to being named head of surgery, the worse it got. He threatened to reveal everything. Reyes's voice lowered to a blade's edge, and Selina, furious, said he'd ruin everything, everything they'd built together. Yousaf ran his hand down his face, worn down by years of complicity. He'd agreed to carry the blame. We thought the secret would die quietly. We were wrong. As Reyes and Inspector Naveed exited the office, the hallway stretched before them like a tunnel with no light. If Bashir was ready to talk, Naveed murmured, Selina had every reason to make sure he never did. By mid-afternoon, word arrived. Dr. Kamran had regained consciousness. In the hospital's intensive care ward, the room buzzed with quiet monitors. But the moment Kamran's bandaged face turned toward Reyes, urgency burned through the haze of pain. You're in danger, he rasped. I found Bashir's journal, handwritten, detailed. He knew. He suspected Selina had deliberately sabotaged the surgery, not out of incompetence, but to silence Farah. Reyes's brow furrowed. Why would she go that far? They were batchmates, Kamran whispered, the words costing him effort. Bashir found out too late. Farah had threatened to expose what Selina did back in med school. She'd cheated, bribed an examiner, even swapped rotation logs. If that came out, Her entire career would have been over before it began. So she removed the threat, Reyes murmured. Permanently. Bashir was going to reveal everything. Kamran continued. He was going to speak up, tonight, at her appointment ceremony. He wanted redemption. Said it was the only way to atone. And the journal, stolen, Kamran whispered bitterly. Someone broke into my office right after I was attacked. That night, back in the isolation of his hotel suite, Reyes paced slowly, haunted by layers of betrayal and ambition. Papers lay scattered across the desk like forensic shrapnel, each one a fragment of a larger, bloodier truth. Naveed watched quietly from the armchair, saying nothing, knowing the detective's mind was constructing a puzzle too dangerous to rush. Then at last, Reyes stopped moving, his gaze fixed on the newspaper he had earlier ignored. Slowly, he unfolded it, flipping through society columns and photos of glittering banquets, until his fingers froze over a faded image from a fundraising gala 6 years ago. A smiling young Selina, resplendent in midnight blue, and beside her, unmistakably, was Farah Rizvi. Before the surgery, before the settlement, before her body betrayed her. The headline spoke of honor, but Reyes' whisper was colder than winter air. They weren't just colleagues, they weren't even just classmates, they were rivals, and rivals leave wounds far deeper than scalpels ever could. As the doors to the boardroom shut with a firm thud, the atmosphere inside the grand, almost cathedral-like structure of St. Cecilia Medical Institute turned grave. The kind of heavy silence that descends just before the storm of truth erupts. The walls, paneled in deep mahogany, and lined with fading portraits that seemed to judge every soul in the room, gave the place the air of a courtroom. But if justice had ever resided here, it had long since abandoned it. Inspector Reyes stepped in, his eyes scanning each face seated around the massive oval table, some anxious, some defiant, and some too calm, as if they believed the blanket of lies wrapped around them was still enough to keep them warm. His presence wasn't that of a typical investigator. It was the entrance of a man who had come to unearth the truth, no matter who it buried. At the head of the table sat Dr. Selina Ahmed, poised, composed and unnervingly elegant in her navy silk suit, her hair tied back in a golden clip, her gaze cool and unreadable. Opposite her sat Mr. Saeed Rizvi, the brother of Farah Rizvi, his face heavy with grief, but his eyes brimming with a storm that could only be stilled by vengeance. Dr. Montgomery, once a cornerstone of the institute, now sat a hollowed-out figure, barely a shadow of his former self. And beside him was Nurse Halima, upright, composed but with lips that trembled ever so slightly, as if they carried a secret that had long fought to surface. Inspector Reyes broke the silence with the calm precision of a surgeon. We're not gathered here for a ceremony. We're here to conduct a post-mortem on the truth, one that was murdered 5 years ago in Operating Theatre 3. What happened that day didn't just break a spinal cord. It fractured the very conscience of this institution. Dr. Selina interrupted quickly. If this is about Dr. Bashir's death, Reyes raised his hand to stop her. No, Dr. Selina. This isn't just about Bashir's death. This is about the system you manipulated, the lives you trampled, and the silence you bought. He turned to Nurse Halima, whose face paled, but whose voice, though shaky, carried the weight of repressed truth. Dr. Bashir didn't lead that surgery, she whispered. It was Dr. Selina. She made the final incision. She made the mistake. When she realized it, she ordered the surgical notes to be altered. I was told to stay quiet. They said Farah's situation would be handled. A cold, sharp silence followed, as if someone had sucked the air from the room. Then Dr. Kamran, now in a wheelchair, yet more upright in spirit than most, wheeled forward, his voice cracking with purpose. Dr. Bashir gave me his journal before he died. Every detail was in there. How Selina botched the surgery. How Farah found out about her falsified research and threatened to expose her. That night, Farah confronted her. Selina begged her to stay silent for the sake of the hospital, her career, her legacy. Mr. Rizvi's voice cut through like glass. Then why did Bashir stay quiet for so long? Reyes looked directly at him. because he thought silence could save what little was left. But guilt devours a man slowly. He was going to expose everything at your sister's promotion ceremony. That same night, he was found dead. Official cause: overdose. Case closed. But the hidden toxicology report told another story. He was injected with etorphin, a drug not easily accessible, a drug that came from the hospital's restricted medical locker. Doctor, Selina stood up, her composure now cracked, her voice sharp. These are all just theories, circumstantial speculation. Reyes slid a photograph onto the table. This, he said, is from a medical conference. In the corner, we see Farah with a flash drive. The same one we found in Dr. Bashir's locker. It contains an unsent email draft. A message to the board, exposing your forged clinical results. She never sent it, because she died in an accident days later. A suffocating hush fell over the room. Selina's face, now drained of color, betrayed the first signs of fear beneath her expertly curated calm. But Reyes wasn't finished. His final words landed like a verdict. You didn't just destroy a career, or a patient's future, you killed the truth, and now, that truth will become the very foundation of your downfall. Tonight, when you take the stage to accept your promotion, I'll be there too, but I won't be handing you a medal, I'll be handing you a warrant. As the sterile fluorescent-lit atmosphere of the hospital's high-security boardroom thickened with an almost suffocating unease, the tension finally broke with the slow, deliberate entrance of Detective Hassan Malik, a man whose reputation for uncovering the darkest truths preceded him. Clad in a rain-soaked trench coat, his eyes scanned the room like a predator surveying a den of trembling prey. The heavy oak door thudded shut behind him, sealing the room in an oppressive silence. Around the long polished table sat the hospital's elite, senior surgeons, administrative heads, board directors, all masked in forced composure, their hands folded, their eyes wary, yet none truly prepared for the revelation that was about to unfold. Hassan moved without hurry, placing a weathered photograph at the center of the table. It was of a young woman smiling in a sunlit courtyard, flanked by classmates during their days at Karachi Medical College. The room collectively stiffened as his voice rang out, low and deliberate. This is not about suspicion. This is about patterns, patterns that point toward intent. And the past has a way of bleeding into the present. All eyes turned to Dr. Anaya Shirazi, the hospital's esteemed neurosurgeon, whose flawless record had long been considered untouchable. Her expression twitched, barely perceptible, but enough to betray a tremor beneath the surface. You treated Zara Feroz just 2 months ago, a young patient whose case was handled with abnormal urgency, minimal oversight, and a surgical decision that left her paralyzed. Why didn't you disclose your shared academic history? Before she could deflect, Dr. Waleed, Zara's brother and a respected forensic pathologist, leaned in, his voice shaking not with fear, but with rage. Because she wanted her silenced, Zara uncovered falsified data in Anaya's final year thesis, research manipulation, that could have ruined her career before it began. Anaya's tone remained composed but sharp. That accusation is absurd. Zara had a rare degenerative disease. Her outcome was unfortunate, but medically expected. Hassan raised an eyebrow, retrieving a folded document from his coat pocket. An independent analysis of Zara's MRI scans. Except this suggests otherwise. Her spinal trauma was precise, deliberate, executed with the kind of finesse only someone with your expertise could perform. Her symptoms mirror that of localized damage, not genetic deterioration. A stunned silence settled before Professor Mahmoud, Anaya's former mentor, spoke with quiet conviction. Zara confided in me before the surgery, she said. Anaya warned her. She was terrified, but determined to expose the truth. Suddenly, the air turned electric. Anaya stood, her chair scraping against the marble floor, her polished demeanor beginning to unravel. Are we holding trials based on hearsay now? Is this how reputations are destroyed? But before anyone could respond, the lights overhead flickered violently, and then, with an audible pop, the entire boardroom was plunged into pitch darkness. Shouts of confusion erupted, a chair toppled, Someone screamed, and amid the chaos, a sharp gasp of pain. Then silence. Seconds later, the emergency lights buzzed to life, casting an eerie yellow hue across the shaken faces of those seated, where Anaya had stood moments before. Nothing. She was gone. In her place lay a scalpel, smeared with blood, and beside it, an empty vial marked Neuramidex, a rare paralytic agent that once metabolized, left no chemical trace. Hassan's voice sliced through the stunned quiet. No one moves. She's still in the building. His eyes were cold with purpose. Dr. Shirazi doesn't flee without a plan, she erases. Dr. Walid, visibly pale, whispered hoarsely, the forensic archive. Zara sent backup files there, copies of the manipulated data, just in case something happened to her. Hassan nodded grimly. Then that's where she's going. Within minutes the hospital's security system was activated. Doors sealed, corridors locked down, armed guards dispatched to the sublevels. Somewhere beneath the pristine facade of the institution's upper floors, a desperate hunt began, one last chapter in a story of betrayal, cover-ups, and academic ambition twisted into something monstrous. In the silent bowels of the hospital, where rows of locked cabinets held decades of forgotten truth, Anaya Shirazi would either destroy the evidence that haunted her, or be consumed by it. The price of silence, after all, had not yet been fully paid. But the debt was coming due. In the dim, sterile corridor of the hospital's basement, where the hum of old fluorescent lights barely lit the peeling walls, Inspector Adil Mirza moved with purpose, flanked by 2 security guards, and Dr. Nawal Qureshi, the hospital's cyber forensics expert, who had been quietly investigating the suspicious data breaches linked to Dr. Samar Zubairi. The recent interrogation upstairs had revealed a chilling truth. Samar hadn't only tried to destroy physical evidence, her ultimate goal was to erase all digital traces of her crimes. As they approached the records room, the scene confirmed their fears. The electronic keypad was damaged, its casing forced open, delicate wires spilling out, and a miniature tool left behind as if mocking them. Someone had expertly bypassed the system. When the door was forced open, they found Samar seated calmly at the archive terminal, her face eerily serene. Next to her was a half-empty glass of water and an open container of sedatives, clear indicators of what was unfolding. "You're too late," she said, her voice strangely calm. "The logs are gone, and in about 4 minutes so will I be." Nawal stepped forward in alarm. "Samar, what did you take?" But Samar only offered a faint cold smile. "Just enough to spare myself the disgrace of trials and headlines. I built my legacy. I refuse to watch it burn." Inspector Adil moved closer, his voice steady. "You killed Dr. Remen when he threatened to expose your fraudulent research, and you deliberately sabotaged Caroline Hashmi's vocal recovery after surgery, so she couldn't speak the truth." Samar's smile didn't fade. "Remen was a coward," she said with disdain. "He benefited from my manipulated studies for years, but grew a conscience when retirement loomed. And Caroline, she was collateral. I never meant for it to go that far. You attacked Dr. Mara too," Nawal added, her voice tinged with hurt. "Because she found Remen's handwritten notes that proved your data manipulation." Samar nodded slowly. "I only meant to knock her unconscious, but the glass table, accidents happen." Her breathing grew shallow, her composure slipping, but the cold detachment in her voice remained. "I've always been thorough." Moments later, the emergency medical team rushed in, but it was already too late. Samar had planned even her end with precision. She lived just long enough to deliver a full confession. She had murdered Dr. Remen using a fatal injection of potassium chloride during the night of the hospital's awards ceremony, staging the scene to appear like a suicide. One by one, the pieces fell into place. The hospital board, realizing that their silence could no longer shield them, launched a full investigation into Samar's past surgical cases and established a patient compensation fund, starting with Caroline Hashmi. For the first time, the hospital acknowledged its role in covering up the truth. 2 months later, as the final snow melted and the first signs of spring crept into the city, Inspector Adil prepared for a new assignment in Brussels. That morning, 2 letters arrived at his flat in London. One was from Samar's estranged brother, unaware of the darkness she'd harbored. The second was from Caroline Hashmi, handwritten and heartfelt. Truth hurts, but silence eats the soul. You gave me my voice back. Thank you. As the gentle hum of the city outside his window faded into the evening stillness, a quiet knock reverberated through Detective Karen Malhotra's study. The kind of knock that signals not just the arrival of letters but the closing of a chapter that had cost far too many lives. 2 envelopes lay in front of him, their contents heavy with the weight of both resolution and a lingering aftertaste of bitter truth. The first, in neat flowing cursive, bore the unmistakable return address of a rehabilitation centre in Edinburgh. It was from Samuel Blake, the brother of the late Dr. Alina Blake, whose twisted obsession had driven her to murderous extremes. Samuel's letter was a small flicker of hope amidst the wreckage. He wrote with a deep sense of gratitude for the settlement that had provided for Caroline Ward's care, specialized treatments and a tailored speech therapy plan that had already begun to show remarkable progress. Caroline's recovery was nothing short of miraculous, as her speech once lost was beginning to return. Though the damage to her spinal cord was permanent and her ability to walk would never be restored, the emotional scars that had once burdened her soul were starting to fade. In his words, the agony of her past had been replaced with a renewed hope, a fierce desire to reclaim a life that had been stolen from her. And while Caroline would never walk again, her spirit had been reignited by the justice that had finally been served, however late. The second envelope came as a surprise. Its elegant script belonged to Dr. Marianne Cross, the survivor of Alina's deadly plot, who had somehow escaped death's grasp after being attacked by the very woman she had once called a colleague. Cross had healed not just physically but mentally, and her swift recovery had led to her appointment as the interim chief of surgery at Ashcroft General. Her words, short but powerful, struck Karen to his core. Karen's silence may shield reputations, but it strangles truth. Your courage reminded us that justice demands light, not comfort. You showed us that the price of silence is paid in lives. The weight of her words lingered in the room as Karen sat silently, absorbing the full extent of the case's conclusion. He placed both letters in the drawer of his desk with a sense of finality, a satisfied yet somber smile curling at the corners of his lips. The truth had emerged, no matter how carefully Alina had tried to bury it. Every thread of deceit, every lie, every calculated manipulation had been unraveled in the end, though the damage caused in its wake would never be fully undone. Karen adjusted his cufflinks as he gazed at his reflection in the mirror, the quiet murmur of method and instinct, "They never lie," escaping his lips. He had always known that the path to justice was never straight and easy, but the mind, when honed and focused, could find its way through even the densest fog of lies. Later that evening, as Karen shared one last dinner with his trusted friend and colleague Arav before his departure to Paris, he found himself reflecting on the chilling psychology that had driven Dr. Alina Blake to the point of murder. "She didn't kill because of some momentary lapse of reason, Arav," he said, voice steady but tinged with a quiet sorrow. "She killed out of a suffocating fear, the fear that the empire she had built on lies would crumble. Every truth that threatened to expose her was another brick she had to tear down to keep her world intact." Arav leaned back, his eyes clouded with understanding. "The ones who have the most to lose are the ones who will do anything to protect it, anything." Karen nodded slowly, his gaze drifting to the darkened streets outside. The distant stars seemed so far away, silent witnesses to the ever-present struggle between truth and deception, justice and expediency. For Karen, the case had drawn to a close, but he knew that the world would always present new mysteries, new dangers, new lies, new faces hiding in the shadows. But for tonight, as he sat with Arav, a quiet sense of peace settled over him. There would always be more battles to fight, but for now, the detective allowed himself the rare luxury of knowing that just this once the truth had prevailed. The little grey cells had done their work. Tomorrow, new questions would arise, new puzzles would take form. But for tonight, justice had finally found its footing, and the truth had been allowed to breathe freely once more.